Aloha, Cynthia Monteleone, and coming with another discussion for the warriors out there. And the topic today is sprint techniques for beginners. And I am so honored to have Jon McDowell with me, who I consider to be definitely an expert in this topic. So welcome, Jon. Aloha.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah. And so you're in Texas, I'm in Maui, and so I appreciate you making the time difference work and everything, especially with your busy schedule with your awesome new facility. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. And can you tell us just like a little bit about your background and your achievements and everything?
So myself, I've been avid. I've run basically my whole life. I started when I was 13 and I still run to this day. So it was always just a passion for me, and I always enjoyed learning about it. I never knew that I would go into it to teaching and coach it, but it's been a fun journey to say the least. I graduated from the University of Texas at Arlington, and ran the 110-meter hurdles there and 400-meter hurdles, and then I went on and did Olympic development training, and from 2008 all the way through about 2013. So and then kind of merged into personal training and coaching at that point. So I've been basically doing this since I was 13.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, that's a long time. And we have something in common. I found you because we have the same mentor, Charles. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. So I learned a tremendous amount from him, especially coming from the track and field background and then going into kind of coaching and personal training. I pretty much studied under him from the first course I took all the way until he passed, unfortunately. And I was going to that last metabolic analytics seminar that weekend prior, but the education and knowledge gained from him has just allowed me to really skyrocket the results I'm able to produce. So I'm very thankful to have had that opportunity.
Yeah, we're in the same boat on that because I know you have the same type of stories that I do, and that our athletes and our clients are like, wow, you've changed my life, or I could have never done this without you. And I feel so grateful to Charles for all of that, because like you said, the word you used was results. And I feel like what he had put in so many hours of experience and research that he shared with us, that we were able to shortcut, in a way to the results, and so
and literally shortcuts.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, is the results. Like, what kind of results are you getting? So which is why I'm interviewing you today, because my passion right now is to help others thrive through sprinting.
Absolutely.
And so, as I mentioned in my book, sprinting increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. So it makes our brain more plastic and basically smarter and happier and all those things, as opposed to long, slow distance, which a lot of people do when they turn 40 or something like this. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm going to train for a marathon, because they feel like they have to do something. And they
don't know what.
Yeah, that's maybe the most accessible thing, to do on their own. And I'm like, hey, no, instead of like going to run miles around your neighborhood, just find maybe a hill, or not even a hill, and just do some sprints. But I think what people are finding, especially over age 40, is that, where do I start? Like, how do I start? And I don't want to pull a hamstring. Everybody thinks they're going to pull a hamstring. So
high probability.
You're right. So and then I counter and say, well, actually, you're more likely to have overuse injuries from the long, slow distance running, so
almost guaranteed.
Yeah. So I guess my first question for you is, like, how would you say somebody should start, especially maybe if they're, master's age, we'll say like over 30 to.
Absolutely. So for sure, it's always, I'm a big proponent of take the long route, right? Because a lot of people, they would like to go tomorrow and run, whereas the reality is to really prepare the tissues of the body, to really prepare the fitness of the body, to handle the physics of running. It takes a while, but there's things that you can do that allow you to get this sensation and feel those qualities while still kind of doing, without having to just go out and run or sprint and do full-on workouts until your body's ready. And so even at our gym, the way it works is like essentially everybody goes through a dynamic warm up. You know, if they can walk there in some capacity, they're going to do a dynamic warm up, because the biggest thing with running is we all know that it is not body weight when you're moving. As velocity picks up, it could be body weight times 2, body weight times 3, body weight times 4. And we know that if people have been kind of sedentary and not working out and exercising, that those loads on those tissues are going to lead to overuse very quickly, right? They lead to injury very quickly. So how can we build the resiliency of the body up to start to handle those contacts and those loads? And that's essentially through dynamic warm-ups.
Okay, so start with a good dynamic warm up. I share one on my YouTube that, and I kind of made it extensive on purpose so that it's almost
turns into a workout.
Right, almost a workout in itself, because
Yes.
But also mimicking, you know, some of the movements that are going to be happening in running. And why not? I know why, but why not static stretching? Why not the old school hold? Hold it, and even worse, hold and bounce. Why not that anymore? Because maybe somebody in this generation has done that, you know, has grown up thinking, if I just keep stretching, then, you know, my muscles will be ready to sprint. So why not static?
Yeah, the biggest thing with static is kind of desensitizes the tissue, for lack of terms. And what happens is when the muscles fire, they have to contract very rapidly. They contract very rapidly. Well, when you stretch statically, especially after about 30 seconds, you change that tension relationship. And what ends up happening is that muscle cannot fire as quickly, and it's going to set up for some type of stress, trauma, or pull.
Yes, exactly. So I found also that I had less injuries with my athletes when they stopped, you know, my high school athletes, particularly, who was, you know, sometimes were stuck in that old fashioned way, when they stopped static stretching. What about, well, this is kind of off on a tangent, but what about yoga? Because so yoga for sprinters. So in a way, you want this balance, right? You want to be able to be full range of motion, but at the same time, do you think that there could be some overstretching going on in yoga? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, with our athletes, they train with us essentially about 8 to 10 hours a week. And so we do all the programming, and the way it works is we call weight training, we call strength training loaded yoga.
Loaded yoga, I love it.
So what happens is, as we all know, one of the most effective ways to actually increase mobility is putting load on the body, right? And they've actually shown that weight training is just as effective as doing static stretching or some yoga or other modalities of that nature. Because what happens is all the sensory receptors and the Golgi tendon organs, all these mechanoreceptors that we have, they respond to load. And especially if you have any type of muscle mass, the load actually helps you get into a deeper position. And then that is set and rehearsed and repeated, and over time that it leads to better mobility. So we actually use weight training to help with mobility versus just, you know, sit down and touch a toe, reaches and things of that nature.
Yeah, I have a short yoga series in my dynamic warm up, but you always have to move through it for no longer than 5 seconds. So it's still staying dynamic, right?
Exactly.
It's very minimal. But yeah, that's interesting, because I think a lot of people think that you get stiffer and less mobile from lifting, but that therein lies who is your strength coach, because I know some of the split squats that I've seen from anyone who's Polican trained, you know, who has Polican trained coach, like that is some serious range of motion and some serious mobility.
So that's one of the limiting factors with, you know, sprinting is if you're not mobile in that lumbopelvic hip complex, the stride is going to be compromised in some degree, you know. And who has to work harder from a running economy standpoint? A person who takes, let's say, a beginner runner, somebody who takes 70 steps in 100 meters, or somebody who takes 59 steps. You know, that person who's taking 70 steps, they're going to have to work at a much higher rate to turn over that quickly because their stride is shorter. So anything that we can do to help with those link tension relationships and open the body up, that's going to facilitate us to be a little bit more elastic, is going to be beneficial to running economy.
Right. So you like the split squat then for something
Oh
like
yeah, we
yeah.
do every variation: front foot, back foot, flat, safety bar, dumbbells, trap bar, open trap bar. They
Oh,
do every
awesome. I
variation. They do walking. So,
haven't done the trap bar ones yet, but I've done all
oh,
the other ones.
those are brutal.
Oh,
Very, very
that sounds
tough.
good. I'm gonna have to put that on my list. um, of course, I have a great strength coach who is, Malcolm William at Source Performance. So he keeps me definitely in tip top
Yeah, he
shape with
keeps you
all that.
honest for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we got off a little on a tangent, but I want to go back to like the dynamic warm up. Part of that is going to be some sort of sprint drill. And I think maybe beginner sprinters don't know about sprint drills, which we can, I can share separately, or I don't know if you have any programs that show sprint drills that they can sign up for, but like,
yeah, we never made it.
What's that?
We didn't. We've never made it. I don't believe.
That might be something good for you to do. I mean, I'll probably do a short video with the basics of sprint drills, but which I haven't done yet, but I definitely want to do that. But like, what are your favorite sprint drills that you might use in a warm up or something like that? And as a hurdler, like there are a lot of great drills for mobility and for form, but I guess a lot of beginner sprinters don't know about form, and so I think some of these drills help them. So do you have some favorite drills that you like?
Yes, and we actually keep it very simple. Like even with our general population clients, like everybody will always do sprint drills just to warm up the body dynamically. And we do 3 drills only, but we do those 3 drills savagely well. We master those 3 drills, and those 3 drills are basically the full range of motion of the running, gait, and cycle. And so we do A skip, we do a front side, we do butt kick run, but it's front side dominant, and then we do a high knee run. And if you understand the rhythm and the pattern of those drills, you can run with great running form.
That's awesome. So just a basic 3.
So we do those 3, even with our athletes. Those are the 3 we master, and we will integrate other straight leg bounds and alternating A skips and things like that in, more for timing and coordination issues, but not necessarily for teaching the fundamentals of running. Like it's A skip, front side butt kick, high knee run, and you truly have to understand where you are in space and time and how to coordinate those motions.
That's awesome. And how many sets or how far do you go with those?
With the kids until it's right.
So, but I mean, like if you're starting at like the starting line on the track.
For sure. So
like,
for like general population, generally we'll go like 50 meters and back.
Oh, 50 meters. So for kids, you just keep making them do it until
again, it's kind of because again, like why run if they cannot show the fundamentals at a walking speed, right? So why, if we can't show it at a jogging speed, would it automatically happen running? No. So if we start to see basically, as Dan Paff says, viruses in the movement mechanics and movement flow, we gotta clean those up. We gotta clean those things out. And so we'll spend more time, especially as the year starts and they're new. We spend a disproportionate amount of time actually working on position and technique, and then we'll do a bit of running. And then that over the year, as they begin to understand where they are in space and how they're moving, it's obviously the warm up is a warm up, and we're off to work. But for average distance, it's going to be about 15 meters, but that 15 meters needs to be hard and it needs to be intense.
Right. So 15, 1-5 or 5-0.
1-5. Yeah, 1-5, and then walk back recovery, or they could come back just depending on kind of your goal and agenda for that day.
And then how many sets of that? Like, so say if they're going 15 meters and then walking back.
Yeah, I mean, generally in context of the whole warm up, they would do 2 of each.
2 of each. Okay. And then
for athletes, it would be kind of just dependent on the day. It could be 2 to 4 on each one of those drills, just depending on how they're moving. Are they sluggish on the ground? Are they quick? And so.
Yeah. And this is just popped in my mind too. I also changed the warm up for my athletes a while back from any kind of jogging for my sprinters. Like, so I think the old school way too, especially for younger athletes and maybe for beginning athletes, is to take a 2-lap jog around the track. Now, I eliminated that, and instead they do kind of like some build-ups at the beginning, and then they warm up some more, and then they do some more buildups, as opposed to this slow jogging around the track. Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I was fortunate enough to train with Dr. Mike Young he's at the athletic lab in Cary, North Carolina, has an Olympic development program. And I trained there for 3 years, and I mean, his design and structure is one of the best as far as I've seen in setting the body up to be prepared to run. And essentially, like, instead of just doing the slow rhythmic jogging, we would cover those same distances in our warm up, but it would be in different planes of motion, frontal, saddle, transverse. And so we're going front skip, back skip, side shuffle, skip lunge. We're doing different karaoke. We're doing different motor patterns in all the planes of motion to really get the body warm. And instead of just this trundling and trotting around the track. And so I think we did that to bias and still get some aerobic capacity in and be able to dedicate more time of the actual session to sprinting. So that our warm-up would almost go, 15 plus minutes straight through until we got to sprint drills of constant motion. So that's more than enough aerobic activity to keep the base for a sprinter. So that was, I really like that approach, and we still keep that.
That's awesome. The dynamic warm-up I have on my YouTube is about 15 to 20 minutes, I would say. Yeah. And also there's the notion that you don't want to ever train those slow twitch muscle fibers. No. Right? So I think a lot of people forget that if you're not training the fast twitch and you're doing things that are long and slow and steady, then you're maybe training the slow twitch, and you don't want to do that for maximum optimal performance, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you want to always keep context around those buckets that you have to achieve. And so outside of what you said, I mean, that's more than enough to keep a good, solid aerobic base that's going to give you a big platform to build that anaerobic base off of.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. All right. So we have let's see, a beginning sprinter we're definitely warm up sprint drills. Right. And then, I guess my next question is, what helps create proper sprinting form from the beginning of a run to the end? So when someone's like, what should my form look like? To me, that's kind of, I like to use the example of, say, 100 meters, because it depends on the distance, right? But you're going to have a drive phase, and then a transition, and then a top speed phase. And so for a beginning sprinter, and by the way, like when I give them workouts on my warrior community and things like that, nobody's ever going at 100%, really. Right. Like they're going,
it takes a long time.
Yeah. They're going from 70 to 80, maybe to 90 at some point after a few reps, but never 100% right out of the gate. And so, I mean, that's going to affect form, but I rather them work on their form at 70%, and then, gradually increase so as to also prevent injury. But okay, that being said, so say you have 100 meters and you're driving out the drive phase. Like, do you have any suggestions of what your form should look like from the beginning to the end? You can pick wherever, whatever. Yeah, so I know that's probably a 3-hour conversation, and in coaching, coaching for years, and it's not
right. But it's
but what are we looking for? Because they have no idea sometimes. I give them the cues of where their hand should be and things like that. But what do you think?
So we try to keep it, we try to say a lot with a little. And the biggest thing, and one thing that I always really liked was Tom Tellez. He said, you're pushing the track back or you're pushing down, but either way you're pushing. And so what ends up happening is a bleed or a transition from the acceleration phase all the way up into their max velocity phase. And so, as you just said, in that drive phase, they're essentially at some degree of an angle. They'll start off at 45, and then they work up to 55, 65, 75, 85, then they get in the full upright position. But what happens with the shape and the position of the body is gone, for the most part, if you took a good athlete in acceleration, and you turn that picture up like this, generally they're gonna look the same as in max velocity. So you shouldn't see a ton of difference in your shapes and your positions, especially for someone who's kind of just beginning and newer to running. The biggest things you want to see is, if anything, they should look like what they would look like on high knee run. Okay. That's what the maximum velocity is going to look like, because they're going to spin. If it's kind of a newer runner, in 100 meters, most likely it's going to be 85, to 75 meters is going to be fully upright, right? And at that
Right,
point, what it
because
should more or less so look like is that upright high knee running mechanics, to keep it simple for them.
so because they don't quite have maybe the strength to keep that drive phase very long.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So so would you say at the top speed, like they should, at 1Q would be for them to try to keep their knees up, like that high knee action?
Yeah,
Like
so
pick
I
your
would
knees up.
say
Maybe
uh,
I've seen a lot of people like their hips fatigue maybe, and
right,
their knees drop. So
right. So the biggest thing is action reaction, and I always use the analogy of a hammer. If I took a hammer and I swung it down hard and hit the hit rubber or something, what would that hammer do? It would bounce back up, it would ricochet. And so the way the body works is through what's called pre-activation, and the foot turns into like a head of a hammer. So if they accelerate that foot straight down to the ground, boom, it pops back up, and that's that elastic recoil of energy that can lift that knee up for free. And so that's going to improve their running economy big time. And so we try to say down, 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 down,
like
get down,
pushing
up.
down.
Because if you're thinking up, you're physically trying to pull the knees up, which you're going to get, that will make anybody tired 50, 60 meters in. And so think about punching the ground, hammer to a nail, and they get that ricochet of free energy, and it lifts the body back in position. Then all they have to do is work the downside. So we try to teach that and get them to feel that, and then use some type of cueing or word that can get them back to that concept.
Do you have any favorite cues that you?
Yeah, so it's really, I literally, with every athlete, they got a different cue, and the way it works is I speak to them in their language. They run, and if it's right, I say, "What did you feel?" It was one word, and they'll start talking in sentences. I say, I want one word. It was punch. It was push. It was down. And then we keep it simple. So I want a paragraph in one word. And so once we do that, we start to see more reps that look the way we want to look. Once we start to quiet the mind.
That's really awesome advice. And back to like kind of like the whole thing together, the drills and everything. So if you're a beginner sprinter, over 40, say, or over 30, and you don't have a coach, but maybe they should look for a coach. But if they don't have a coach, then what do you think about like maybe videoing? Should they video their drills and their form and compare it?
Yes, I mean, to this day, I still video almost every workout. I got one of those drones that can follow you.
Oh, that's fancy.
Yeah, so I mean, and it's been the best investment because I'm able to really see things you could never see. So sometimes I'll film from the front, I'll film from the side, sometimes I film from behind. And I'll tell anybody is set that phone up and really look at your positions and shapes. And I'm sure you got a lot of resources, but what we did is we got the Atlas Kinogram, which is just the 6 primary motions that the body should go through in a running cycle. And what you can do is there's a free app, guys. It's called Coach's Eye. You go download the Coach's Eye app. It's very free. And you film yourself from the side and then put the video in the app. And you can just go frame by frame by frame and compare yourself to some of these images and resources that are already out there. And that's how anybody can teach themselves to move better and run better with better technique.
That's golden advice. I appreciate that. That's really good because again, like we've been doing this for years, so it's kind of ingrained in our subconscious. But that being said, I like to also stress to my athletes always that it's always a work in progress. Like
always to the day.
You're never not done. You're never perfect. Like whether it be block starts or the end of your race. Like my thing is I scrunch up at the end of my 200, sometimes at the end of my 400. When I get tired, my shoulders come up. So I'm always trying to think about, relaxing my face, relaxing my shoulders. Yeah, making sure it's all loose. So it's like, it's never over. So don't think, okay, overnight you're going to be a sprinter and it's going to be perfect. Like we're always working on it, which is the beauty of it too, because you're always in that journey and you always get these little rewards.
I mean, we think in hundreds and tenths, if you can improve 0.01 and do that for 30 steps, that's 0.3 of a second. So
we
so minute of things that have the biggest impact. And so it's an art form and it takes years to develop.
Yes, we talked about that a couple of years ago. I think you were calculating how I could reach my goal in my 400
Sure.
just based on, the strength of how I'm hitting the track. So maybe I'm stronger with that push, and also the turnover, how fast I'm. So, that was so cool that you did that calculation for me. If I just improve by this tiny bit with every step, then all of a sudden I'm 2 seconds faster. Like it was really
it's
cool.
crazy. It's crazy. And so that same hypothesis is kind of what I've been working on the last 2 years, and it's still in the works, but we've seen tremendous results so far, even for myself and for all the athletes we work with. So we had some really good results this year, and we take it down into those bite-sized chunks that are doable. It's like, I want 0.005 improvement.
Yes, that's so cool.
Literally 0.005, and they don't do anything else. And you always start, say they have 6 things they're doing suboptimally. Well, pick the thing that's the worst. And that's going to have the biggest impact. Okay.
What do you see as the worst sometimes, and like especially maybe older athletes that are starting, like, or maybe our high schoolers too.
Absolutely. So we work with a lot of adults
thing all the time.
We work with a lot of adults. We work with a lot of youth athletes, and so interestingly enough, strength is the mother of all qualities. And so last year with COVID, our gym got shut down. Everything was shut down. We could go outside, and so we were outside for a good portion of the year. I mean, we would run outside 3-4 days a week with the athletes. Well, they started to plateau and hit a threshold point. Okay. And so I'm not a big fan of doing the same thing, expecting different results, right? So I saw limitations in what they were able to achieve. And so I said, okay, we're not doing this again. So the last 6 months or so, we only lifted weights. We lifted now in our gym, guys, we have skill meals, we have the non-motorized treadmills, we have all the modalities. So we're able to still kind of sprint and do posture and position. And we always warm up with the dynamic warm-ups and sprint drills. But predominantly, we really focus on getting the athlete strong to their height. And so there's an interesting research from Dr. Ken Clark. He got his PhD at SMU Locomotion Lab, and then he's at Westchester University now. But it's very interesting. They show that for every athlete, depending on their height, there's a certain level of strength that they have to apply to reach their optimal stride length. And they showed that the shorter you are, the stronger you have to be. The taller you are, the less strength you need. And we all know this because they have longer tendons, they have a little bit more elasticity, but they can leverage the length of their leg. And so as we kind of talked about, stride length is a big determinant of speed. And so for us, we really focused on strength the last 6 months. And we actually ran for the first time with some of the kids on Tuesday, and they either matched their lifetime best or exceeded it. Some of them exceeded by 0.3, 0.4 of a second. Wow, and we haven't run. And so with saying that, it goes back to the beginner athlete and the beginner masters athlete. You don't want to shortchange your strength and conditioning, because running is force and physics dependent. And so if we can't put big forces in the ground, it takes us longer to do that, right? And so if I land on the ground, I have to put down 2-3 times body weight, 4 times body weight, period. The only difference that's going to separate the elite sprinter and somebody just starting is how long that takes. Usain Bolt, it takes 0.08. Joey, who just started, it could take him 0.32. But they both put down the same amount of force, okay? And so that's what the very interesting is. You have to have that body strong to handle the loads. And you will see that most people run faster by integrating in some strength training, plyometric training, and getting closer to where they should be on those norms.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So strength training wise, for someone just starting, would you say 3 times a week or 4 times a week, or mix it up, or what, depending on where they are? What would you say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, depending on where they are, Coach Poliquin always to say, when you go from 3 workouts to 4, you will get 50% faster results. And I have seen that for sure. It's crazy. When you go from 3 workouts to 4, one day is 50% faster results, and it's true. So if they got 4 days to allocate, I would do hybrid sessions to where they do some type of dynamic warm up at the start. They can bias the high knee runs and some of those different activities as low level plyometrics to start to strengthen the body dynamically, and then they can finish up with strength training, and then that may be a that could be a 2 to 3 month programming. And then they can start to go outside, and when they go outside, they're going to be injury free. They're going to feel probably better than they felt in high school.
Yeah, so I'm 45 and I started when I was 40, back on the track after 20 years of over 20 years of not running. I think I jogged with friends a couple times. So I was having 3 kids. My bones were, totally moved all over the place. So I got back on, I was very weak. So like, I just like to stress to people like this, my running did not happen overnight. Like I worked really hard and definitely, of course, was strength training. But I remember about a year into it, or maybe it was about a year and a half into it, my coach, one day I was running and my coach after the interval said to me, did you miss strength training this week? And I was like, oh, how did he know? Oh my gosh. Like, I was like, yes. Like, it was the only week that I had missed, or that earlier that week I had missed my workouts. And he could see with his eye that I had not been strength training.
Yeah, you'll see longer ground contact times. You'll see less bounce.
Yeah, he could tell the difference in my running form. And then he said, oh no, you got to keep up with that because you're asking for injury if not. And that's definitely what I've seen is that the better you can keep up with the strength training. But I think a lot of masters athletes maybe forget about that. And they think that they can just run for their workout, or like just the repetitive intervals will keep them strong enough. But I think especially when they're not in competition, and as we're aging, we're losing muscle mass, so sarcopenia, dynapenia. So it's especially important to keep that strength training going for sure. Okay, so I would say, what other sprint techniques will help develop the beginner sprinter to set them up for success in the long term? We've kind of talked about a lot of different things, but I guess, long term, again, they think it's going to happen overnight, but any other advice that you can give? Like,
for the long term, for sure, developing the coordination and rhythm within the high knee drill is going to be critical. And like I said, even for a lot of them, they don't run initially because their muscles are ready to handle those loads that they're going to incur. Like the gastroc takes 3 times body weight at 7 meters per second, which is basically what somebody could get up to, but how long could they stay there? The soleus takes 7 times body weight at that velocity. They did this study in 2012. And then they showed the hamstring takes up to 10 times load. That's why the hamstring goes so quickly. If it can't handle those repeat efforts, then there's going to be a muscle strain, right? Tissue will break down.
And also the high knee drill, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just thinking like when I'm picturing the high knee drill, you're also forced to land on the ball of your foot in that drill, which I think a lot of people mistakenly are landing on their heels when they start.
Oh yeah. Well, this is, the easiest way to fix that without coaching, because we work with a lot of people at once, especially with kids. So we don't have, we cannot break it down. So it's like, so somebody does that, it's like, take your shoes off and do it. They fix it within 3 steps. And the reason why is your body, the kinematics of how you're moving, you will not touch that heel to the ground. So if you think about it, if you stood on a bench or chair, that's knee height, and I told you to drop down, how would you land?
Right. Yeah.
For sure on the ball of the foot. Is no way if you were barefoot that you would land on a heel. Right. But because they had a very thick cushion shoes.
Oh, so you think it's
land
shoes.
Like that.
Okay.
Yes, you had those thick cushion shoes, you can hit that heel and you don't feel it, but the loads are still traveling up the body. And that's why we do see a lot of the shin splints. We see the knee issues, hip issues, low back issues, because those impacts still are going through the body, and they're going through the body in a way that is not designed to absorb them. So yes, you want a 4-foot landing on all those drills, mid-foot to 4-foot.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I think again, like with that high knee drill, like that's where you're forced to land. So would you recommend then any kind of drills without shoes, or just
Well, so that's the
I mean, I
newest
never have
thing.
my athletes do that, but I'm just curious since
Yes. Yeah, I mean, for us, I think like the most people's feet by that time in life, they're gonna be 30 years deconditioned, right? So it takes a long time. So
true.
currently, my record, I've been in the barefoot shoes probably 3 months now, and I tell you, my feet hurt.
Oh yeah.
They
Okay.
hurt. I mean, this is what's crazy is I've run every day almost since I was 13. And I mean, I lift, I do all this stuff, and my feet are still very weak. And so it was like eureka to me. So I started off the first month and walking in them and doing just light skips. And what's interesting is your body will stop you at the point that you can't do anymore. Whereas when we have the thick cushion shoes, we can keep running for hours. Whereas that lows are going to places it shouldn't go, and we're going past our physical tolerance level.
So maybe
I
barefoot
put them in
shoes,
them
not
first.
for, right, not for heavy duty interval
Yeah,
workouts or anything
no,
like
no,
that.
no, no. I would say, like there's a company called Ultra, Altra, and they make a cushion wide box shoe. I would recommend that for your actual intervals and workouts and drills.
Okay.
And then throughout the day, they did a study, and it was at Loughborough University with Vivo, I believe, and they showed that in 6 months, if you just walked in a minimalist shoe, you increase the cross-sectional area and muscle strength over 60%. And as we know, that foot's our only contact point to the ground. So what I would generally recommend is walk in those shoes during the day, wear like an ultra or wide box shoe when you actually run or work out.
Okay. And speaking of shoes, that's really excellent advice, because I'm always asked about what type of shoes should
Right.
people wear. And my coach used to own a running shoe store, so we did a little video, and he said, well, it depends on if you pronate or supinate,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So, but
And yeah, so even to the pronation, supination, that then the shoe itself, the shoe is really not even the question. It is, we have to build our foot back up. And
right.
so if we overpronate or if we oversupinate, those are issues within the intrinsic, extrinsic muscles of the foot, right? And so our foot is, for 99% of people, it's the issue that our foot has been detrained by having to basically being braced and resting for 10, 20, 30 years. So of course they're gonna overpronate, because when you're in a shoe, the body actually doesn't have to use the medial longitudinal arch, right? So that's where what's called the adductor hallucis is, and that muscle starts to drop. And so we see people stay in this pronated position, essentially where they land in, right? And we see their knee go in, and then
Yes.
we see them come back out, and they come up. That's called overpronation, and that's generally caused from a weak immobility at the big toe, but also the adductor hallucis muscle not doing its job, but also the medial longitudinal arch. And so it's as simple, honestly, as just walking in those shoes, making the feet work a little bit, or they could do barefoot foot strengthening exercises.
I was thinking there's
And
probably
then I think, yes,
incorporating the strength training will obviously help with that as well.
Exactly, incorporating the strength training forces those intrinsic, extrinsic muscles to work, and then they can essentially wear the shoe that's a wide box shoe with a little bit of cushion. They'll be fine. But and for the long term, that's going to be the best for people, period. Like anything else is essentially a crutch or a brace.
Okay. That reminds me that like when people go from training to maybe they're starting to be ready for spikes, and I think that varies per individual, and when you're ready for spikes, track spikes as a beginner sprinter, or I don't know what your opinions are about that, because when you're going from a supported shoe to the spikes, you're not supported in the spikes, so you better make sure, I think, that that all of those muscles you just mentioned are trained and strong enough to support your body weight, that impact, from your body weight and sprinting, and without that support, because the spikes are generally not supported. Not only that, but if you have a stiff plate, which I always recommend a flexible plate for beginner sprinters, and the stiff plate's kind of harsh on the Achilles. The stiff plate, is like propelling you forward. So like, what do you have, like, what's your experience with that, like for a beginner sprinter? Like, But
Yeah.
obviously the barefoot shoe is great advice because that will
Right.
help. And for us here, we do beach running, which I think
Yeah,
is
that's
the same
I saw
concept.
some of your videos, and you guys
Yeah.
do a lot of beach running. So anything they're doing like that is great. You know, just simple things that they don't even realize is going to be very helpful for them in the long run.
Yeah,
And I mean,
strengthening
walking
all
around
those
the
little
house.
tendons and muscles.
Oh yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is to transition to the spike. It's kind of along the lines that we spoke about. I think number one, do they even need to be in them? Like, so like if there's no looming competition, if they're months, say they start in August and they're running in June, I mean, keep them out of them until they need to actually be in them, right?
Mhm.
And if
So
if
for a
they
beginner
train
sprinter,
properly for,
what month would you say start practicing in them?
yeah,
If you
they
start,
could.
if you're
I
training in
mean,
August for a June meet.
yeah, I mean, for a new person, it would be most likely around March, right? Because we want to spend a decent amount of time working on the foot health itself, right, and build them up to be successful in the long run. And I don't like to shortcut and cause long-term issues for a short-term gain, because generally speaking, they wouldn't run much faster in the barefoot shoe versus a spike to begin with if they're not even physically ready for the spike, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I agree. And then that tends to cause some injuries sometimes when they get into spikes too quickly.
it's almost instantly. So it's
Yeah.
like be very conservative with the spikes for sure, and to know they're gonna come, and you'll know when you're ready for them to come.
Right.
Also,
Yeah, they get very excited, and then they
Yes.
like, because they really
You,
want it. They're excited about track and they want to buy the spikes and they want
yes,
to get in the
for
spikes,
sure.
you know, but you
You
gotta
gotta
be
pull back
patient.
the
I keep telling
reins.
the beginner sprinters, like, you have to be patient. Um,
Yes.
and it pays off. Like the
Yeah, like you said, it took you 5 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It took
Hmm.
me, yeah, it took me 3 years to become a world champion. From basically I ran 1 minute and 30 seconds in my 400. That was my
Yeah.
fastest 400. Oh, my screen just moved. Sorry. So yeah, it takes time, and I just kept showing up. Like I showed up
Right.
3 times a week for training and 4 times a week for strength training.
Right.
So is that something a formula that you find, like,
Yeah.
how many times a week should a beginner sprinter run? You would
I
say?
like the formula you just said for sure.
Yeah.
If they can find a good program, good coach, that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
For
Well,
sure.
in our warrior community, I give 3 workouts every month that they can try. I give a short sprint workout, a medium, like say a 200-meter type
Right.
workout, tempo, that sort of thing. And then I give a long interval for, it would be like a volume type workout for a 400-meter runner. So still not volume for like a miler
Right.
or anything like that, but maybe like a 500, 400, 300 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I give 3 types of workouts that they can try to get faster every week at.
Right.
But yeah, I find that if you're just running once a week, that actually is not great either, because you're more apt to go too hard that day
Mhm.
and maybe pull something. I don't know. What do you think about
Yeah.
that? Not one
It's
day.
yeah. It's so running is they just have to be adapted to the stressors and rigors of running, and so the more we repeat that, or we have repeat exposures to stress, the more resilient we get to it. And so that's what the consistency will allow them to do, because as your shapes, positions, and velocities change at every one of those distances. So the better they get at moving at the short distances, the better economy they're going to have at the 400, 500 distances as well.
True.
So if they're able to allot that time, 3 would be great.
Awesome. Okay, so to wrap it up, like any other advice that, or why would you actually, maybe I'll say, why would you say that sprinting might be a great way for, to keep healthy while aging, for someone who hasn't sprinted, and like, maybe why it might be more accessible than they think?
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think it's accessible to everybody if they just open their mind to the many possibilities and the ways that you can go about it. So we do something called sprint interval training. And essentially that's where we incorporate that in at the start of our workouts, at the end of the dynamic warm up. And they'll basically work on, kind of like you said, different energy systems. So one day may be short, 6 seconds, and then one day may be 15 seconds, and then one day may be in the 30-second range. So everybody we actually train with our personal training, they actually do sprint interval trainings. And so we just change the modalities sometimes. So if they're just starting, they can sprint, but maybe we put them on a prowler to where it's low impact, you know. And so integrating in different modalities.
So the prowler is the push sled.
Yeah, that would be like a pushing sled. Yeah, so they can push the sled, go high intensity, low impact as we begin to build their tissues up over time. And so sprinting is an invaluable tool. It's one of the most anabolic drivers of exercise you can do. It's very effective in a short time frame. It's 4 minutes total cumulative work. 4 minutes is just as effective as 45 minutes of aerobic work, And so as you already talked about, BDNF, it increases telomere length. It helps with sarcopenia, dynapenia. It actually potentiates the central nervous system to help with strength training. It's all the fascial muscle fibers that give the body shape and tone.
Stronger bones, I would say too.
Yes, absolutely. Improve bone density. So I would encourage everybody in some capacity to incorporate sprinting in, even if it's, on a sled or whatever they have access to and whatever their body will allow.
That's really awesome. I totally appreciate that. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. You are definitely, like I said, I think it's amazing how many hours you've put into learning, and that you're able to share that with all of us and your clients, like how lucky your clients are, because I know that you took a lot of, Poliquin's classes, Charles' classes, and, and also, there's the invaluable, questions that we got to ask him and that he could always answer for us. It was like an encyclopedia.
That was the best part. Literally, it was the Q&A and just the questions that were invaluable.
Like literally had an answer for any question that you could give him. And I loved how he would kind of put his eyebrow up and think about it for a second, like he was researching the files in his brain, and then all of a sudden he'd just come up with the answer. I remember I asked him once, like, is it okay to take an ice bath before a competition, and how long before, like how many hours? And he sat there and he did that, and he said 36 hours. And that was it, like no explanation. Because I remember later he said he didn't have time to explain to everybody why. He just, it's like, now that I do the research, I understand, because it maybe took about 150 research articles to come up with that conclusion. And you can't explain all of those 150 research articles, but
when somebody doesn't know what an ice bath is in the class, he doesn't.
So that was, I just really appreciate him, and I appreciate you for helping to continue to share his wisdom, and
absolutely,
for encouraging people to sprint as well. So how can people find you online, or
our business page is Train Vibe. We got an Instagram, Train Vibe. And then my personal one's JMac Fitness. So.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much again. Mahalo and aloha. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day, guys.